Hey, Ancient World Honors guys, and welcome to our very brief lecture on Korea. It's really not going to be that long, but it is going to be important for our quiz we're going to have next week. So make sure that you watch the video sometime over the weekend and let me know if you have any questions, okay? And again, mirror image, it's a little backwards. Apologize for that. I'm going to try to flip it. And I'm a history teacher, not a tech guy. We'll see if this works. If not, hold it up to a mirror and watch it. That's exciting. Okay, now, so first of all, we're talking about ancient Korea. Now, this has been a chapter where we talked about the golden age of China, the Sui, the Song, the Song dynasties. We just got through talking about medieval Japan. In between those two areas of China and Japan, we have the small but not insignificant country of Korea. Korea. This is not working. I'm not sure why. Hold on just a second. Korea. Okay, so as we can see, we have China over here, and this is northern China, northeast China, okay? And then we have Japan. So Japan is pretty much parallel to Korea. The closest country to Japan is Korea, and this is what we just studied, these four big islands of Korea, or Japan. And then Korea, of course, is the toe-looking peninsula that sticks out into the ocean here. The consequences of being between Japan and China for Korea has led to somewhat of a difficult history in many cases. And Korea's had a very long history and a flourishing history. But a lot of the history, Korea has been the tennis ball between the powers of Japan and the powers of China. And eventually, the 20th century, Russia's going to get involved in that. We're not there yet, so, right? As we've already studied, though, China has been the one to most heavily influence Korea, yes? Because it has the Han Dynasty that first conquered this area of Korea and dominated Korea for a number of years. That's going to be part of our notes. And then, of course, we just learned about the Tang Dynasty, and the Tang Dynasty will have Empress Wu. Empress Wu will also have great influence over Korean government and Korean law. As we move throughout Chinese history, the next dynasty we'll study is the Yuan. The Yuan is the Mongol dynasty. The Mongols will also conquer Korea. Now, when we get into the 20th century, we'll learn how Korea is annexed by Japan. So the threat comes from the east instead of the west. Yes? And so Korea has had that kind of checkered past of being tossed around between the two superpowers of Japan and China. What this does to Korea, though, is it has Korea fight for its identity, right? To have things that are solely and specifically Korean that is beyond China or Japan. And that's going to be part of our lecture as well, all right? So Korea, they're right in the middle between Japan and China. In the beginning, right? And when we have these countries like Korea, countries like Japan, that are so old, right? Their histories don't necessarily begin in fact. The histories begin in myth. And to me, as the history nerd, that's very fascinating. I love that, right? And we talked about the Japanese myth of Izanagi and Izanami and how they had a Materasu, and Materasu becomes the mother of the emperor, right? And that's pretty fascinating. This story is also very fascinating. Stay with me here, right? Because the founder of Korea is supposed to be a demigod by the name of Dan-gun. Okay, Dan-gun, his name is here, right? And he is considered to be around the myth / legend / fact of Korea is that it was founded in about 2333 BC, and it's called the Gojoseon, right? The Gojoseon, Go meaning ancient, the ancient kingdom. And here's the story. The gods are there, right? Dan-gun, the god, is there. I think I've got this right. And a bear and a tiger approach Dan-gun, and they seek to become human. Yes? And so Dan-gun says, well, if you want to become human, you have to pass a test. And the test involved them living in a cave for a number of days, 80-ish days, and only eating like very rice and drinking water and fasting and living in this cave. And if they were able to do it, then they would become human. Now, the tiger can't make it. The tiger leaves. The bear makes it, right? The bear makes it through the trials, and as a blessing, Dan-gun makes the bear into a woman. Dan-gun marries the bear, and then they come to Earth and they start the Korean dynasty. Yes, that's the myth. Okay, now, so Chosun And remember we talked about Japan and how Japan is not the original name of Japan. It's actually Nippon. Well, Chosun is actually the original name of Korea. Korea is a Portuguese corruption of the dynasty that had existed in Korea. And of course, when the Portuguese show up, they say, what is this place? And lost in translation, the natives say Korea, and that's what happens to the language, or to the name of the country, right? And so Korea is what we call it, originally Chosun, right? Okay, so as we know from Chinese history, there were tribes living in Korea until it was eventually conquered in 108 BC by the Han. The Han would rule over Korea throughout their reign, divide Korea into 4 different commanderies or military states, right? So it was run by the Chinese. During this period of time, Korea is heavily influenced by China with Confucianist culture and Taoist culture, as well as writing. The Koreans adopt and use Chinese writing during this period of time. Eventually, the Han dynasty would collapse, and Korea would separate then into 3 different kingdoms, and this is what we call the Three Kingdom period. Okay, the Three Kingdom period in China, and this is after the decline of the Han. Okay, so in the north you have the largest kingdom of the Goguryeo. In the southeast you have the Baekje kingdom, and in the southwest you would have the Shilla kingdom. Okay, and if you want to look at them on a map, here we go. There it is. Okay, so you can see Goguryeo takes up most of the peninsula here, including North as well as South Korea. Now, at this point, there is no North Korea. It is just Korea, the Korean peninsula itself. So that is a 20th century thing. So don't worry about North or South at this point. Okay, Baekje here and Shilla there, and the small kingdom of Gaya there that would eventually be absorbed by the Shilla. Okay, so we're not worried about the Gaya. Just remember Shilla, Baekje, and Goguryeo. Goguryeo is the most powerful military. Looks like if anyone's going to combine and unite the kingdoms, conquer everyone, it's going to be the Goguryeo because they have the territory and the military might. But here's what happens. The Han dynasty did not completely collapse. It's still there. It just doesn't control Korea. The Shilla decided to make an alliance with the Han. And the Shilla make an alliance with the Han, and together they absorb the Gaya, absorb the Baekje, and eventually conquer the Goguryeo. So the Shilla would be the ones to first unite all of the Korean peninsula. After they do that, they kick the Han back into China and rule over all the Korean peninsula themselves. That's what this slide is about here. Okay? So, 668, the Shilla kingdom allied with the Tang dynasty. I'm sorry, the Tang dynasty, not the Han. The Tang dynasty of China to invade and conquer the kingdoms of Baekje and Goguryeo. Okay, so the Tang, of course, is also in this chapter. The Shilla and the Tang have that alliance relationship. The Shilla united Korea for the first time and established their capital at the city of Gyeongju. Gyeongju, still a major city in Korea, has lots of history and culture there, and is considered kind of the ancient capital of Korea, other than Seoul, which is the capital today, right? The Shilla traded with China, Southeast Asia, and Japan, and were heavily influenced by those cultures. Okay, so when the Shilla establishes its kingdom, then it trades, and of course, not only items, but ideas flow into Korea, namely the idea of Buddhism. Buddhism becomes the national religion of the Shilla. They adopt it and build large temples and monuments to the Buddha, which we'll look at, right? So Buddhism came to Korea during the period and was adopted as official religion. Okay, so here's some examples of that. Here is the largest Buddhist temple in Gyeongju, which is the old capital, and this is Bulguksa. Okay, Sa meaning mountain, and the Bulguksa, so the temple at the bottom of the mountain. Okay, so it does. The Buddhist temples are interesting because it's not like a church or a synagogue where you have a large enclosed space. There are no like times of worship in Buddhist temples where you just go and sit with all the other people and worship the Buddha. It is when you feel like going and meditating. Maybe you want to go every day, maybe you want to go once a week, maybe you go once every 3 months, but you can go there, and there are smaller houses. They look a lot like this with the gabled roofs and things like that. This is actually the front gate of the temple, right? So you go through the front gate, and then there are large courtyards. And in those large courtyards, there are monuments like stupas to the Buddha, as well as houses that you can go inside and meditate. Now, inside those small houses, you have statues of the Buddha, and you can burn incense. It's very peaceful and quiet, and you can go in and meditate. Again, this is Buddhism, so there's no chanting, or there's chanting, but there's no singing or any like ritual worship. It's you meditating with the Buddha. Sometimes you'll hear chanting. And the monks, of course, live there. Now, but if you go to Gyeongju, you go to Boguksa, and that's cool. But then you want to go up the mountain. Because remember, this is at the bottom of the mountain. You go up the mountain, and you see one of the most treasured Buddhist monuments in Korea, and that is called the, sorry, I keep thinking it's this computer. It's the smart one I need to click. The Sokoram, okay? The Sokoram Grotto. And what's cool about this is that it's at the top of the mountain, and it's inside a cave. So it's a natural cave that people have gone in and carved out the rock and carved different Chinese and Korean gods, right? But, of course, the centerpiece is the freestanding or the free-sitting meditating Buddha that's located in the middle of the grotto. It's about 12 to 15 feet tall, and it is considered to be one of Korea's greatest national treasures, right? Built during the Shilla dynasty in order to worship the Buddha. Now, so it is inside a cave. So you go into the cave, but the cave opens up out to the mountain. Now, you're close to the ocean here. And so from the top of the mountain, you can see the ocean. It's a very beautiful scene. And there's a smaller temple there that you can also visit alongside the grotto. At one point, there was a jewel right here on the forehead of the Buddha. And again, when we talk about ancient cultures, we talk about their knowledge of astronomy and their knowledge of how the sun, the moon, and the stars move across the sky. It turns out that this statue in this grotto is connected to that knowledge, because on the days of the summer solstice, the sun will rise over the ocean and eventually into the grotto and onto the face of the Buddha. Now, the legend has it that when the jewel was in the forehead, the sun would strike the jewel, and the jewel would light up, and flashes and everything would go off, and it would be a magnificent thing. Well, in the 1910s, Japan annexed Korea and stole a lot of its national treasures, including the jewel that was on the Buddha's head, and they never really got it back, right? But anyway, the sun still rises onto the face of the Buddha on the longest day of the year. And on those days, very devout Buddhists, even today, will meet at the bottom of the hill with the monks, and they will hike up the mountain until they get to the top at sunrise, and they will witness the sun coming up over the ocean and shining on the face of the Buddha. Then the monks make them breakfast. It's very nice, right? And so that's kind of why Gyeongju is kind of this cultural and religious center of Korea, even though Seoul is the capital. They have very beautiful things there. They have museums dedicated to the Shilla. They have the Cherry Blossom Festival every spring, like Japan has great dogwood trees. And cherry trees. Well, Korea also has that, and you can go there in the spring, and it's beautiful, right? And so Gyeongju was a major capital of the Shilla dynasty. Now, in my classroom, you come back again. I want you to look over at the wall where I've got the bookshelf, and there's a map, and that map is actually the ancient map of Gyeongju. I'm not going to move the computer to show you, but when you come back to my classroom, take a look at it. It's there. Okay? Now, the Shilla dynasty eventually declines. And it's replaced by the Goryeo dynasty. Now, Goryeo Korea. This is that period of time when the Portuguese show up and say, hey, where are we? And the natives mistakenly say, oh, you're in the Goryeo dynasty. And the Portuguese say, oh, Goryeo. And that eventually becomes Korea. Okay? So founded in 918 AD, traces its origin back to the Goryeo kingdom. Again, Go means ancient. And so the Goryeo is the ancient Goryeo kingdom. And this is just the Goryeo kingdom. Right? Buddhism continued to flourish. And there was a type of porcelain that was created in this period of time. And remember, we talked about porcelain, we talked about the Tang and the Song dynasties, and we talked about their beautiful porcelain. Blue and white is what we call the Ming, right? Well, during this period of time, the Koreans developed their own type of porcelain, and that type of porcelain is called Celadon, right? Give me a second. Celadon has this beautiful green color. I'm trying to get it in the light here. There we are. This beautiful green color. Instead of like a blue and white, it's green. Now, this is a teacup, right? And here's how tea works in ancient Korea. Instead of tea bags, you just put the tea leaves in this tiny cup here, right? And so you have a cup inside of a cup. You put the tea leaves in there, you pour hot water through it, and in the bottom of the cup, there you go, you have holes. And the water goes through the tea leaves, through the holes, into the cup, and eventually you have tea, right? And so this is kind of a ceremonial teacup that they would use in Korea. And this is the green celadon porcelain that was created during the Goguryeo dynasty and became very famous and would trade around the world. Not as famous as the Chinese porcelain, but still pretty famous, right? Okay, so movable type, we talked about that, how that was a great invention in the Song and Tang dynasties. That would make it to Korea during this period of time. And so there's a lot of connection here. So between 1230 and 1270, in the middle of the Middle Ages, right, Korea was invaded by the Mongols. Now, we haven't gotten there yet with China, but let's go ahead and run that through in Korea, right? The Mongols invaded Korea 7 times, would eventually conquer Korea and be controlled by the Mongol dynasty in China, which was known as the Yuan dynasty. The Yuan dynasty, okay? Now, the Mongols ruled Korea for 80 years, and we're going to get into more of that story when we get to the Mongols because there are two major invasions, attempted invasions of Japan that the Korean people are going to be very instrumental in, not in a good way, right? Okay, so the Mongols ruled Korea for 80 years. When the Mongol dynasty collapses, then the new dynasty, the Chosun dynasty, is created. And again, remember the first dynasty that was founded by Dangun, according to the myth / legend / fact, is the Go-Joseon, the ancient Joseon. This is just the Joseon, right? And it's founded by Yi, and it's moved the capital to Kaesong, and Kaesong is modern-day Seoul. So now we have the capital where it is today, in modern-day Seoul. They adopted the Neo-Confucianist philosophy, which we studied about with the Tang, the idea that Confucianism is also a conglomeration of other philosophies, any philosophy that's morally and ethically sound, and sometimes talks about an afterlife, which original Confucianism does not, right? So it adopted Neo-Confucianism. This caused Buddhism to decline a little bit in Korea. Now today, Buddhism is fine. There's also Confucianism, and then there's also Christianity there as well. But during this period of time, Neo-Confucianism became stronger at the expense of Buddhism. Now, the greatest king of the Chosun dynasty was a king named King Sejong. He's not great because he was a great warrior. He's not great because he conquered lots of territory. He's great because he was a great thinker and educator. Yay, education, right? Now, here's what he would do. He created, and again, this goes back to the narrative of Korea establishing an identity that's other than China or Japan, right? Korea becoming itself. Now, remember, we talked about during the Han Dynasty how Chinese writing comes into Korea and becomes part of the Korean language. Remember, Chinese is a simple alphabet, so the spoken word and the written word are two separate things. King Sejong says, we can do this and we can do this better. It's confusing to use Chinese writing when we have a completely different language. So what he does is he takes their language and he applies letters to their sounds, right? So he really creates a phonic alphabet for the Korean language based on their spoken word, right? And it's called Hangul. Hangul, the spoken Korean alphabet. And it is very practical. And we have an I period that is intro to Korean language that I encourage anybody to take because it's really practical and easy to learn the alphabet. And then you can read it pretty easily. You can compare it to like English sounds and then read the letters. I'll show you in a second. So this begins the golden age in Korea where there are advancements in science and trade and agriculture. So this is the height of Korean dynastic history, right? Where they have a flourishing, kind of a renaissance of knowledge. Of course, influenced by China, influenced by other areas that are growing during this period of time, Korea also grows. So King Sejong creates the alphabet, as we talked about. The alphabet has 19 consonants and 21 vowels. Now, 21 vowels is kind of an overstatement because some of the vowels are combined vowels. You can imagine like you have ah as in car, but in Korea you have ah and you also have ya. And so it's a combination of vowels. Ah, ya, oh, yo, oo, you, right? And so there's really not as many as 21 vowels, but some of those are combination vowels. I think it's really maybe 24 total letters, and some are combinations. And so it's just like America is 26, 24. It's not hard to learn, right? And the words are written in blocks, so you write them. You don't write them out like a word in English. You write them, and I'll show you this, in a block. Like this letter goes at the top, this letter goes on the right, and this letter goes on the bottom, and that creates a word, right? So you read it almost in a circle, clockwise, yeah? And like Chinese, the sentences are written from top to bottom. So if you read a Korean book, you start at the top and you go to the bottom, and there are lines going up and down that you read. Okay, let me show you. So this is a picture of the Confucianist scholars in Korea that happens during the Chosun period. It's still there. There are lots of Confucianist schools, and they still dress like this with the white robes and the hats. And, of course, they study Confucianism and ethics and morality and society. So this is an older painting of what those academies, those Confucianist schools would look like, what you'd have to wear. This is their uniform, right? Okay, so here's King Sejong. If you go to a school in Korea, they have a large playground usually, and then in the middle of the playground they'll have a statue. And most of the time that statue is of King Sejong because it's the guy who founded their language, right? So here we have King Sejong sitting on his throne with a book of the alphabet that he wrote, right? And so he's considered a great educator and therefore a great king. He is also on their main currency, which is the 10,000 won. And there's King Sejong there on their currency. So very important, right? Very important guy. Here is the alphabet. These are the vowels, like this is ah, right? Ah is the line with the thing sticking out of it, that's ah. And that's the double vowel is ya, that's a and ye. So one line is the vowel, and two lines is the ya in front of the vowel. Oo and woo. Yes, and what the best way to learn, this is how I learned, is I got like a Korea travel book. And in the back of the book it had the alphabet, and it had the companion English sound. So like ah as in car, or oo as in look, or as in flute, right? That type of thing. And so you just go through and you just read and you learn it. You can learn it in about a day. In fact, in Korea, I think like 95 or more % of the population is literate because the alphabet is just so easy. It's very practical, right? So let me show you an example. So this is the word Hangul, which is the name of the Korean language. This symbol here with the circle and the line is the H sound. Like we would have hat, like an H. So ha. And this is the ah sound, like in car, right? So ha, and this is the N sound. And so ha, on, han. So you read it clockwise, right? And then you have gul. So this line here, right, the yellow is the g or the ka. In Korea, it's the same sound. G and ka are the same, right? And this is the u, as in, I learned it as oo, which is like a u as in look, right? And then you have the backwards 2, which is the l sound. Now, L and R are also the same sound in Korean, right? And so Hangul, Hangul, it's the same sound, which leads to some funny moments when you're trying to speak English with someone from Korea. But Han, and then Gul, right? Hangul, which is the type of language that they speak, right? So it's practical and easy to learn as well. I encourage anyone to join the I period and learn with me, right? Okay, so I think that's it. That's really what we need to know about Korea up to this point. We pick up there later when we talk about the Mongols, and we'll go into more detail about how they were involved in the Yuan dynasty. But study this, and if you have any questions, email me. And remember, when we meet again on Tuesday, we're going to have the quiz, so be ready, okay? See you guys.